to the Alpha Movement podcast, where I, Tom Foxley, am joined today by Chet Morjaria of Breaking Muscle, of Strength Education, and a whole host of other things. He's really one of the, I think, most deep thinking coaches in the UK, definitely at the moment, potentially in the world. He's one of the guys that's been around in the CrossFit scene for a long time, and he's someone we can all learn a huge amount from. And as I was kind of alluding to, we go into some quite kind of deep thoughts on what it means to be an athlete, what it means to be a coach, and how you can just be a better human being overall. Now, before we get into the show itself, I want to make you aware of a Patreon page, a way that you can support the Alpha Movement podcast without having to do really anything. If you head to patreon.com/Alpha Movement podcast, I'll put links all over social media, so hopefully you can find it. But if you head to patreon.com/Alpha Movement podcast, you can donate whatever you want every month to help keep this show going. Without you guys, I really wouldn't be able to do this show, and it's just an incredible way to help this podcast keep going. And as I said, you can donate whatever you want every month. So thank you very much. If you do that, that would be massively appreciative. And also, if you head to facebook.com/Alpha Movement Official, you can also find my new ebook, Intensity Tolerance. It's basically a deep dive into making you a better athlete by getting you comfortable with being sort of suffering through intensity and pushing yourself harder. So head to facebook.com/Alpha Movement Official and you can find out more there. Now, let's get on with the show. So, Chet, welcome to the show, man. It's a real pleasure to have you on. I'm really looking forward to kind of getting this going, because you are someone that I have respected for a long time in the community. And the more, as I said earlier to you, the more I've delved into what you do, the way you coach and the way you think about coaching, the more it kind of correlates with what I think. So it's really awesome to have you on the show.
Thanks very much, Tom. That means a lot. And I'm looking forward to the chat. Sounds like it's going to be a good one.
Awesome. Can we start off by kind of giving us a bit of an idea about how you got involved in the strength conditioning world and kind of a bit of your background, please?
Sure. This is always obviously the first question that you ever get asked when you go on a podcast or anything like that. And my answer is still terrible. So I'm gonna walk you through my journey, as it were, and you can kind of see what you think, take from it what you will, and if you need to ask questions or want to go into any aspects of it, then we can do that. So I guess athletically and sports-wise, my introduction to all of that stuff was tennis, really, and that was in my late teens, early 20s, because I was that kid at school who, the fat kid who got picked last and never really liked any of the kind of school sports, just didn't connect with those. So into sport, first of all, it was really tennis, and I'm an all or nothing kind of guy. When I'm in, I'm all in. So with tennis, I was all in to, playing in the snow, on ice, in the summer, just all day, every day, you name it. So naturally, I transitioned from actually playing tennis to just wanting to get better at the sport itself. Transition probably isn't the right word, but you know what I mean. Just, wanted to immerse myself in the sport and just get better at the sport, understand it better and get stronger for it and everything else. So that's when I kind of meandered, as to use a word you mentioned just there, into strength and conditioning, or whatever I thought that meant at the time. So, we're still talking athletically at this point, although I was coaching tennis at the time. I wasn't coaching strength and conditioning or anything like that. So got involved in that just through my own kind of athletic endeavors. And as with any golf club or tennis club, or at least most of them, the gyms in these places, as you may know, are something of an afterthought. So you basically cobble together whatever you can in terms of training. So, that was like dumbbell deadlifts, which are as fun as they sound, and just whatever else you can find in not even a gym that's as well equipped as one of today's commercial gyms. So just cobble stuff together, and it started to feel right, and I started to see improvements in my tennis, and then started to work on those kind of aspects with some of the other guys that I was working with coaching tennis. And from there, I guess, continue my own athletic journey in terms of stumbling across the CrossFit rehauled.com website. So this was early, sort of very early 2000s. Yeah, so it's maybe 2005, 2006, something like that. Maybe getting my years mixed up. No, I think that's about right. It all blurs into one. And then so just kind of, as soon as I stumbled on that website, it felt like home, like it, as I'm sure it kind of does for many people. And whereas I'm not a CrossFitter now, I was for a number of years, and it empowered me and enlightened me in a number of different aspects when it comes to kind of training and strength and everything else. Continuing athletically, I guess I got burnt out a number of times through being the guy that, trains like 2 times a day for like 14 days in a row. And I was that guy. And I was that guy a number of times because I was stupid and didn't learn from my mistakes. So as you may have seen, I know you've looked at a bit of my writing, and, I come from a place of, I don't know, I guess most people call it sensibility or sort of, just kind of rational thinking or whatever you want to call it. But a lot of that is from personal experience, as with anything. So, so at this time so this is still early 2000s, was in getting involved in coaching on the kind of strength and the fitness side, and also just continuing my own advancement and just learning from that journey. And through this process of kind of getting burnt out a number of times and just kept trying to go back to, to CrossFit or whatever variation of it I was doing, I kind of realized that to have longevity in anything, you need to enjoy it, right? So that was kind of a major life lesson for me around that time in all of that stuff. And so I started to dig into and get involved in the aspect of this world that I really enjoyed the most, which is strength. And so delved into, and again, all or nothing. So delved into and have delved into many different aspects of the strength world from both an athletic and coaching point of view, and learning and everything else from powerlifting to strongman to Olympic weightlifting. And my attitude with all of that stuff is just go all in and, be part of the community, live, sleep, eat, breathe it, everything else. And that's a pretty neat way to learn. And then generally bringing it out into the stuff that I'm doing at the time, again, whether that's training wise or whether that's coaching wise. And I guess one of my strengths is the ability to pull insight from different disciplines, and as I've moved forward with my coachings, perhaps seemingly unrelated disciplines to anything to do with strength and fitness, and bring those lessons and those ideas and those concepts and those learnings into the world of strength and fitness and movement and coaching to empower others. Along the same lines, just to kind of fully answer your question and go full circle, I hope the timelines are making some sense. So my thoughts around all this stuff and my passions, the reason that I do what I do right now, and retrospectively, the reasons that I've been doing all this stuff for the last 10, 15 years, is to empower others to live, to teach, to train, to move, to work, and to learn with purpose. So this concept of purpose, I know a lot of people talk about it and think about it, this concept of purpose underlying everything that we do, and I'm sure we're going to delve into that a little bit further, is and has been massively prevalent in my life. And that's expressed itself in a few ways, really. So I guess if you talk about how that's expressed itself in terms of projects and work and coaching that I've been doing within the community, it looks a little something like... So around that time I was getting involved in all this stuff, I started like a community website. It was called FK UK. Don't ask about the name. And that was centered around, not that I had all the answers or anything like that, but centered around bringing a community together, mutual learning, the fun that comes from bringing a community together, and just empowering each other in that respect. And then if you take that forward it's been things like, so I used to run a series of strongman competitions called UKSPS, don't ask about the name, and that was the UK Strength and Power series. I used to co-run those, and again, it's, you know, based around bringing people together, doing something cool that a lot of people haven't really done or maybe even considered. And there were strongman competitions, strongman and strong woman for the everyman. So, you know, the general shape of things would be, what's the rules on swearing in this podcast, by the way?
Fucking go for it, mate.
Uninhibited, cool. Okay, so the general shape of things was to kind of scare someone by saying, you know, you're going to be putting 150 kilos on a yoke, or 200 or 250 or whatever it is, and you know, people haven't really lifted those kind of things before. I know you're a big fan of Julien Pineau and everything to do with the prowler and all those aspects, and obviously that, you know, pushing and pulling things features quite heavily in strongman too, and taking people to the brink of intensity in that respect. So just, if you're talking about empowerment and how that relates to the human body, empowering people to see that they can do stuff that they, even the moment before, didn't necessarily think was possible. You know, and having some fun whilst doing it, and bringing people together whilst doing it. And then even if you bring those kind of ideas into my Breaking Muscle adventures, so with Breaking Muscle, I started off. So for those of you who don't know it or haven't seen it, check it out, breakingmuscle.com, super cool site, health, fitness and sport and everything in between, and, you know, articles, workouts and all sorts of amazing resources you'll find on there. So I started writing for them as a guest writer, and then became a staff writer, writing once a week, and then saw an advert for like a basic editorial staff, if you like, and then that brought together a load of skills for my shady past before anything in terms of strength and fitness. And so I started getting involved there and ended up becoming managing editor of Breaking Muscle UK, so breakingmuscle.co.uk. I hope you don't mind the shameless plugs.
No.
And then managing editor of breakingmuscle.com for a year or so as well, breakingmuscle.com obviously, and recently stepped out of that to really focus on the strength education side of things, which is my company, again centered around empowered discovery style learning, if you like, bringing people together. I fully believe in the power of in-person learning and not just online stuff, even though I could potentially be infinitely richer by now if I decided to put all this stuff online, but I would only do that if it actually augmented and facilitated better learning as opposed to making it worse.
Yeah.
And having some fun whilst doing it. We have 3 rules when it comes to any learning. So literally, like I don't have too many rules, but we have 3 rules when people come on the courses and the modules and the live stuff that we do. Rule number 1 is don't die, which usually makes the room go kind of straight-faced and somber, but you know, it has central nervous system, survival instinct, purpose-based meaning as well. So kind of a double meaning, if you like. Rule number 2 is have fun. And rule number 3 is question everything, especially what the guy at the front with the weird hair is saying. That's me, if you haven't worked it out. And then rule number 4, if there's a rule number 4, which I usually throw into, is that trash talk is compulsory. So all of these things, you know, have been prevalent throughout my whole journey, I guess, and especially when it comes to the coaching and all of that stuff. And at the risk of throwing in all my plugs within the first 10 minutes, there's also something that I've set up recently just for the hell of it, which is Strong Mind Book Club, which we can come on to at some point as well, if you like.
Definitely. Yeah, we'll definitely get into that one, because getting other perspectives is my whole thing, and that's
so now if like the Facebook Live, you know, breaks or whatever, I've covered all the shameless plugs, so we're good.
Genius, I like it. So you spoke there about finding your purpose and finding your why. How did that come about in the first place?
I think so. We have 5 pyramids of performance within strength education, and they are everything from understanding positions and patterns, so movement, understanding coaching interactions, and being able to solve problems as far as that's concerned, understanding the brain and pain and perception and prediction and all of that stuff. Everything from that to programming and just generally how to problem solve, if you like, within a coaching environment. Because as far as I see and believe, coaches are problem solvers. So underlying every single one of those pyramids is purpose. And by that, I mean, if we don't understand and connect up and align our purpose as coaches, are we talking generally on this podcast to kind of coaches, athletes, and everyone in between? So
yeah, coaches and athletes mainly. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So if we align our purpose as coaches with the purpose of our athletes, and we do investigation and actually really genuinely figure out and help our athletes to figure out why they're doing what they're doing, and empower them in that respect. And also the purpose of the business. So, the gym or the coaching business or whatever that is, then some really cool shit starts to happen. And, when these things aren't aligned, that's when we see missed expectations and just basically working at a surface level. The thing is with purpose, because it's a very kind of conceptual thing in a way, right? So, we can talk about purpose and everyone talks about purpose. And for me, I think that's half the problem. So I feel that purpose and starts with why, #starts with why, is becoming a bit of a buzzword.
Yeah.
In 2016 and kind of moving into 2017. And I think it's becoming a bit cool and trendy and hipster-like to post, that you're finding your purpose and you're starting with why and stuff like that. And just like movement is and was, and just like business, perhaps kind of, business systems and all this kind of stuff, especially in the coaching world, probably is at the moment. You can pay lip service to it and you can just say you're doing it and you can be kind of Instagram-like on it and just do it at a surface level, or you can really spend some time and effort and soul searching to find your why and help others find their why. And that's a big thing for me. And finding your why is about finding patterns, really, like finding patterns in terms of how you are perceived and how you interact with others, finding patterns in terms of what really, makes your heart sing and what really kind of pulls you down as well, and how that's manifested itself within your coaching, your early life, your life, like, your interactions with your partner, your interactions with your friends and everything else. So it's some pretty deep shit, and, going through those processes and going through the things that you really should and need to do to find your why can be hard.
Yeah.
Just like training, just like coaching and just like everything else, right? If you want to do it properly, it's hard. So I applaud any effort to find purpose, and I devote myself to helping others to do so and reap the rewards and everything else that comes from it, and do that through like an empowered approach that really kind of empower people to find their own purpose. Finding your own purpose then empowers you to understand and make sense of and move forward with and motivate yourself with everything that you do. And when you align that stuff, as I say, between coach and athlete, it doesn't mean that they're the same thing. It doesn't mean that a coach and an athlete have to have the same purpose in order to facilitate effective interaction and effective coaching and create positive change, but they have to be aligned. If I don't know, like, what's a typical example? If an athlete is after longevity and a coach's purpose is to get someone to push their limits and compete all the time, then there's going to be some kind of conflict there unless you find a deeper understanding, right?
Exactly. There's something that's kind of come up recently, and the kind of the start with why thing is great. But as you kind of alluded to throughout that, I think it really starts with who. And Brian Grasso and Carrie Campbell brought this up for me, and since I played it around in my mind, and it's become like more and more a mainstay of kind of what I think. And it starts with who you are and who you think you are and the beliefs you have.
And it starts with you, right? It starts with you,
exactly.
And then only then you can, when mom's happy, everyone's happy, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. So what kind of influences outside of coaching do you have?
That's a good question, and the list is pretty extensive, really, because we can start with Simon Sinek, I guess, because this is where this conversation started. And in terms of, I should probably just turn around and show you what's on the bookshelf, really. But there's everything from, let's see, I hope you don't mind me turning my back to the camera for a second, but there's everything from like business books. So that could be anything like the old kind of Gary Vaynerchuk to sort of business sociology type books. Then you've got mindset stuff. You've got, let's see, philosophy-based things about death and all sorts of crazy pieces like that.
Let's talk about philosophy, dude, because that's all what I'm about.
Cool. One sec. I'm just trying to see. About a lot of stuff based on, and I guess this touches on philosophy, a lot of stuff based on humans, our senses, how humans interact, and I guess understanding deeper meaning within humans deep down. So, that's where it all starts for me. That's where purpose starts for me. You can look at any aspect of human purpose, from survival instinct to anything above that, because I believe it's all above survival instinct. And so that's what interests me the most. But then you look at other aspects, like, for example, there's books back there, and this is some of what I enjoy the most, I would say, on things like artificial intelligence. And I'm crap with author names, so apologies if I'm not giving you the names. I can pull some stuff out if you like. But the stuff, for example, on artificial intelligence still relates back to being a human for me, because it's like, okay, how do you clone a human, and how do you create something that thinks like a human? Is thinking like a human even possible? What does it mean to actually think like a human? And all this kind of stuff. So again, apologies for the lack of references. I can pull out some pieces for the like some, I don't know, my top few books in that respect for the readers, for the listeners to get on into, or they can sign up to the book club, because because what we're going to be doing there, in fact, is exactly this. And a lot of we're going to be sending out a book a month, basically. Cool. It's just kickstarting in December. Yeah. And again, community based. We're going to hop onto a Zoom webinar and get hopefully a good number of us on, up to 50, I think, can be included, and just thrash out some concepts within those books. And those books aren't going to be fitness and strength related books. They are, they are all going to be books that will help people, mostly coaches and facilitators and rehab specialists and people within this field, to empower others. But they're not going to be a direct link necessarily to fitness and strength, and that's half the fun, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like when I try and think back to a strength conditioning book that's changed my opinion on strength conditioning, I can't remember one for 50 pages. But if I think about like anything, whether it's like some Marcus Aurelius or like anything like that, that's completely changed the way I look at life and the way I look at training. I think that's where coaches and athletes too, like, sometimes go wrong. They're so wrapped up in this small world and they don't gain perspective from outside. You talk about coaching in a way that's kind of progressed through levels, I think, and you seem to like see coaching as an art now. When did that change?
Well, it's interesting. I think coaching is an art and a science for me, but I feel that you can go too much down both routes, right? You can go too much down the coaching is a science route, and as we understand from philosophy, the nature of knowledge and the nature of science doesn't really lend itself to the fact that things are absolute, right? Mm-hmm. So you can go too much down that route, and I struggle with people who talk in absolutes, because, as I said, that's not the nature of how this stuff works for me. At the same time, I think that, and this is where I spend a lot of my time and a lot of my emphasis, it's kind of the natural thing to do, I think, for a lot of coaches, especially because there's not a lot of formal and required education within the industry around the world, is to treat it too much like an art, and treat it, like there isn't really anything there isn't a lot that you need to do to lay the foundations for that. And, it's all very subjective, and everyone's got their own coaching styles, and everyone's got their own learning styles, and you shouldn't mess with that, and all of this type of stuff. And again, if you take it back to how we learn as humans, how we move as humans, how we function as humans, then you can draw universal parallels and principles, right? So our central pyramid, I should really go to the whiteboard here, but I'll try to do it without. Our central pyramid, and the one that we base everything on, and again, it's kind of conceptual, but we can dig into specific situations here and specific instances of what it actually looks like, is we have purpose at the bottom. We then have principles as the next layer. We then have processes as the second to top layer, and performance at the top. And a lot of the time, I think, as athletes, coaches, and everyone in between, we start with performance and then kind of look at the processes that we can maybe use to make that happen, and hop between different processes. Very little thought to kind of the principles underlying those, and if there are any principles underlying those, and what the parallels are, and what's actually worked and what actually hasn't, and what should work and what doesn't work. And never mind the purpose underlying all this stuff. That's like an afterthought. So as far as I'm concerned, we can work from the bottom up. And if yes, you have learning styles, but you also have a brain, and the brain works in universal ways when it comes to, for example, the difference between the visual system and the vestibular system. And, we can take and how those interact and connect, and how they help us as humans to move and learn. And so you can take these universalities. You can take the universality that the number one objective of the central nervous system is human survival, and to have you still be alive. Rule number one: don't die in that particular moment, right then and right now. And you can pull a lot of different pieces of information and ways to go forward from there. So, for example, you can look at the relationship between, say, tension and relaxation, and what creating tension actually tells the central nervous system, how that interacts with, what you're actually doing out there on the gym floor. And for example, we can talk about breathing there. So I'm just trying to give you a kind of a follow through example. So when you look at breathing is the first functional movement, right?
Yeah.
So breathing, in that respect, you can tie that into the bottom of the pyramid, which is purpose. It helps us to stay alive. It also helps us to stay safe in terms of like bracing our spine and everything like that when we're performing lifts. But breathing can also be used to relax, as anyone who practices yoga or anything similar will know. So, then you have these two things, tension and relaxation, which you think of as dichotomies or maybe contradictions, but actually they're facilitated by the same thing. And they are the underlying principles and thought processes that go behind breathing, and what it actually does and how it actually facilitates us lifting and moving are driven by the same purposes. So when you start taking the actual concept of purpose, and from the base human purpose to, like, you can go, so Maslow's hierarchy, there's a book on that on the back shelf. And when you start looking at just the basics of everything we've known for a long time, if you put it that way, we can start to systemize and make coaching based on science, and I guess look more like a science. And coaching systemization for me is incredibly important as we move forward, and as some of this industry has looked pretty professional for a long time, and other aspects haven't. And that that's important because, you know, we're in a results driven industry, and we want to, this is going off on a bit of a tangent, but it's a surprise and it's a shock and it's a game changer for athletes to actually get results.
Yeah.
You know, and for a coach to actually facilitate those things and, you know, not stare people down the wrong path and all that kind of stuff. And yes, it's trial and error. All coaching is trial and error and guesswork and educated guesses to a certain extent, but it shouldn't be the case that it's like a shock to get results. Just like in the service industry, it shouldn't be a shock to get good service, right?
Yeah.
So this should be a natural thing, and it should be the norm, and we should help to facilitate that. So pulling that back, systemizing coaching, I think, is incredibly important, because then we say, and again, I've kind of defined coaching in a few different ways so far, but another thing that I feel coaching is, and how I define it, is the individual expression of universal principles. And so if we take the universal principles, and there are universal principles because they're human principles. So if we take that stuff, we can still allow coaches to have their own styles and work with athletes of different styles and work with people of different purposes and everything like that. We're not trying to create robots here, but we can create consistent experiences across groups of athletes. We can create consistent experiences across groups of coaches teaching the same athletes, teaching one athlete over time, teaching in different facilities, if you're trying to put this into a business perspective. And as we know with anything, consistency, you know, it almost to a certain extent doesn't matter what we actually do, right? As Dan John would say, everything works for a short time, for 6 weeks or whatever. And you know how people can get caught up in the kind of reps and the sets and all this kind of stuff, where actually just doing something and doing something that's pretty good and doing it consistently is going to work a lot better than doing something perfect and doing the next thing that's perfect and the next thing that's perfect, or so you think, and doing that intermittently and sporadically.
Nice.
So that's why I think that all this kind of stuff is important.
When you started that, you spoke about the foundations of training. When you're coaching, what are the kind of fundamental principles that you hold close and constantly remind yourself of?
So we have, I'm kind of giving the game away here, but we have at Strength Education 3 sets of fundamental principles that help us to resolve and solve and look at any coaching or movement situation. And they are tension and relaxation, as I mentioned, mobility and stability, and primary and secondary motion. And so by that, I basically mean, to cut a long story short, how we should be moving, if there's such a thing as perfect movement, versus acceptable or unacceptable secondary or accessory movement, or things that we shouldn't be doing. And again, we could go down a perfection versus imperfection route here, or anything you like. And sometimes we do get quite philosophical about this stuff, but you take those 3 sets of principles and everything that they mean and everything that they can tell us if we work through them, and they are pretty empowering and all-encompassing when it comes to actually being out on the gym floor coaching and understanding what's happening out there on the gym floor. Because the reality is, we need to be able to systemize this stuff to some degree, because we can't be out on the gym floor looking at a million different things all at once as coaches or athletes. There needs to be an element of, okay, let's create some systems, and let's look at what systems are. So let's take that back a step. A system is meant to tell you an answer. No, they're meant to guide you to the answer. Otherwise, you know, they're not empowering systems. You're going to have to teach every single coach and every single athlete every single thing, which isn't how the world works. And it's not the way things should work in terms of, you know, skill acquisition, movement retention, and or like skill retention and all that type of stuff. That makes sense?
Yeah, 100%. When you think back to your progression as a coach, what was the item or the event that changed you most, and how did that influence your coaching?
Oh, that's a really good question. The item or event that changed me most, I think maybe not an item or event, but just I guess it's just this sounds like a really kind of basic answer, but the thing that first comes to mind is the acceptance to just be mentored and learn off other people, and be wide in your perspective. I know that's not really an event, and it may not be quite what you're getting at here, but if I could go into a small industry rant here, I think people don't necessarily, coaches don't necessarily always put themselves in the path of those events or experiences, if that makes sense. Because for example, I used to travel when I was starting out in my coaching journey and my athletic journey. Both could be 2, 3, 4 hours, and that could be once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, whatever it would take. Whatever money it would take obviously means allowing to facilitate my journey and to facilitate my progress and to allow me to facilitate the progress of others. And so I think the first thing before even thinking about one single experience is, I've been lucky enough through Breaking Muscle to talk with on a daily basis in terms of what they're writing, plus on podcasts and everything else, with some of the greatest coaching minds in the world. And, been lucky enough to, I was speaking at the Strength Matters. See, I'm doing shameless plugs for people that aren't even me now. I'm speaking at the Strength Matters Summit 2-3 weeks ago, or maybe a few more by the time this podcast comes out. And lucky enough to share a stage with Dan John, Mark Fisher, and Perry Nicholson, amongst many others. So, just being amongst those guys, sitting in a room with them, never mind being on the same stage as them, puts you in the path of a million different. I can't even tell you, like Mark Fisher, first proper man crush, right? This is the first time I've publicly admitted that, so that's a world exclusive. But I can't even tell you the impact that guy had on me over that weekend. I tried to tell him and just didn't really work out so well. But I could look at my notes now and tell you probably at least 10 game-changing experiences, and I don't use the word game-changing lightly, that I had that weekend. And so it's hard for me to put it down to one thing, but I've continually put myself in the path of the opportunity to come across, if you like, these experiences from people who are a lot better and a lot clever and who've been around a lot more than me, and are I don't really like the word experts, but who are kind of experts in their own fields and have a lot to teach. And then at the same time, putting those things into practice and applying them. We have an assistant coaches. What the place where people start at strength education is, if they are at this place in their career, is the assistant coaches course. But I won't take anyone on the assistant coaches course if they don't have a means to apply it. So, no matter how keen they are on their learning, I believe in that process of application so much that if there isn't at the moment a means to express that coaching and learn and that kind of two-way or multiple way learning through applying it, then it's not for them right now, because that, it's just not fair on them. The learning just won't make as much sense and they won't get as much from it. So I think, again, it just boils down to putting yourself in the situations where you can daily have multiple game-changing and life-changing experiences. Like literally, I know that, I will come off this podcast and something we've said, some interaction we've had, something that I've learned from you will be something that I will take forward and do something with, because, and that happens every single time I coach. That happens every single time, whether I'm coaching coaches, coaching athletes, or sat there as a student. There's always something that you can learn, right? And a friend of mine, Rannoch Donald, he is an old kettlebell guy. Rannoch, sorry, I hope you don't mind me calling you either old or a kettlebell guy. And it's very much more than that too. But he always says that when one teaches to learn, And I think that's really cool, and it's the case. So sorry to answer your question so indirectly, but for me, it's about putting yourself in the path of those things.
So I'm assuming from that answer that there was a time when you weren't putting yourself in front of mentors and you weren't seeking that opportunity to learn. Do you remember?
Sorry.
Do you remember the time that changed that?
I think there's times when I find myself in that position and then slap myself around the face and put myself in front of people again. So again, I can't put it down to any one time, but there are many times over the last 10, 15 years, if we're talking about my kind of coaching endeavors, where I found myself just sat there doing my thing, or out there coaching, or whatever the case may be. And again, I believe that there's learning experiences in coaching experiences, but yes, at the same time, didn't necessarily have mentors in all aspects of my life. And let's be really honest now. Like, I imagine that a lot of my colleagues are in the same position. There are still areas of my life right now where I could be actively seeking better mentorship, if that makes sense. So, for example, I have, so business is something that I'm slowly getting to grips with. And I have a degree in management, but the reason I chose that degree was because it was an awesome mix of all the ologies all in one. So although I have that degree in management, like in terms of business, it's probably no secret to those that know me that I'm very much at a white belt when it comes to business stuff. And yes, I could certainly be putting myself out there more in terms of actively seeking proper business mentorship. And so in terms of other aspects of my life, in terms of coaching and movement and everything else, those are the aspects that I'm choosing to focus on right now. So whether it's a case of prioritization or something else, I feel like, I will kind of go, and like I say, I fully immerse myself in different aspects. Usually that's the way I roll into, as opposed to kind of dipping into one specific or like a range of specific things. And right now that is everything that actually specifically relates to my field. And as we know from our conversations before, sometimes that has been stuff that completely doesn't relate to the field, or it might be a business side or something else. So whilst I do keep myself reading books on all sorts of different topics in terms of mentorship and putting myself in that path, as you say, I'm always putting myself in that path, but I'm always kicking myself in the arse at the same time, saying, right, you have skills lacking here and you need to do something about it. So I'm not trying to avoid your question, so I'm not, but I really can't, I struggle to pinpoint sort of specific instances and times where these things have kind of, where I've had a kind of light bulb moment, if you like, I guess, because there's so many.
Yeah. Well, that's a good way to be. When you think about putting yourself in the path of the ideal mentors now, when it comes to the athletic side of things, the coaching side of things, the fitness side of things, who are the people that you're putting yourself in front of now?
Let's see. So in terms of coaching, I've just signed myself up to a Stu McGill course. So he's in the UK for his course number 3, whatever that is. So just going to go ahead and do that. Just got myself involved with the guys, Jeff and Mickey Martin, who now run Brand X, used to be CrossFit Kids, because I believe that, again, their stuff is based on the universal elements of learning as humans, and that sits very well with where I'm at. I have the privilege of connecting up with a bunch of my mentors in person, relatively frequently as well. So I'm just trying to think if there's any more. The easiest way I can kind of give you that answer really is through courses and live things, I guess, because again, books are good, but I strongly believe in putting myself in front of people. So what else have I got coming up? Yes. Okay. So this is a cool and interesting thing. So those three guys that I just mentioned, so, Dan, John, and Mark Fisher and Perry, are probably the three people, and especially Perry, right? So there's something strange that goes on with Perry Nicholson. And if any of you haven't checked his work out, check it out. But I call people like mate and dude and bud and all that kind of stuff the whole time, right? And Perry and Dan and perhaps Mark, I'm not quite sure, because I've only recently come, really sort of connected with him as a person. But those are two people I find it really hard. I'd never call them mate or anything like that. So maybe that's an indicator of the level of respect. But in terms of the giants who I always the work who I always look back on and who we stand on the shoulders of, if you want to talk about that. So whether you're talking about movement and movement screening and movement assessment and anything else like that, I think you'd be hard pressed to come up with those kind of things that don't have a link back in some way to the FMS and to Gray Cook and all the guys surrounding that. And if you go to the aspects of tension, for example, I think you'd be. So I haven't done any work with this guy in person yet, but I think you'd be hard pushed to not go back to the work of Pavel. And so surrounding yourself in two ways, I guess. Yes, there's the courses and things like that, and but there's also books and there's also online. So if you're looking at online, I'm trying to answer your question in a few different ways here. Then the two people that I haven't connected with in person yet, I would love to, and I will make plans to, kicking myself in the butt, up the butt kind of way. But the two people who I just always look at and always speak sense to me and rattle my cage and do both of those things at the same time are probably Thomas Plummer on the business side, and I know he's around in the UK from time to time as well, and Vern Gambetta on the strength and conditioning side and just the coaching side in general. So if you're talking about other influences and aspects, let me see. I know it's always an interesting question to listen into and learn, what influences other coaches have. So just trying to answer the question kind of as best and as comprehensively as possible, really. Mike Boyle, I guess, for a lot of movement-based work and actually putting the concept of purpose into practice. I really like Josh Henkin's work as well. I like the way that Josh facilitates. Again, his business is based around a particular tool, the sandbag, so it'd be easy for him to be very kind of top of the pyramid, if you like, and look at processes and look at performance. But his training systems, and I'm a big believer in training systems, and the full name of strength education is Strength Education Training Systems, is housed in purpose, but is definitely housed in principles and movement principles and fundamental principles and things that have kind of got forgotten as we've progressed. I'm just trying to look back at the bookshelf, if you excuse me for a second.
Cool, man.
To see what else. Let's see. I'm just going to mention a few names that are kind of jumping out at me right now in terms of the books that I keep on referring back to right now. So let's see. Todd Hargrove is on the movement side, is someone who I refer back to a lot. The likes of, let's see, I've got a bunch of Katie Bowman stuff up there. Gary Vaynerchuk, of course, on the business side. So I'm kind of sticking relatively specific now when it comes to these disciplines. And yeah, that's probably a reasonable interpretation of that.
Nice. That sounds great. It's so nice. Just looking at that list, that is like an ideal guest list for the podcast. All those guys. That's
pretty much right.
Yeah. You've said before there's not one right way of doing something. Can you elaborate on that a tiny bit, please?
Yeah, of course. So it's funny because I say there's no one right way of doing things, and I kind of make a joke about it usually because I'll put it in an absolute statement itself. So I'll say that, you know, anyone who tells you there's one right way of doing things, no matter what they're saying, is wrong. Now, obviously, that's full circle because I'm telling you the same thing. But I feel that. So let's see the epitome of let's take it back to an actual kind of real live example, and let's call out Louis Simmons, because why not? I guess Louis Simmons for me is probably the epitome of, as a coach, the epitome of my way is the right way, and you know there's no other way. That's the only way to do things. But looking at that on a real practical level, surely it depends on purpose. So, you know, I'm not going to, as with everything, I'm not going to tell you that the fact that there is no right way of doing things, no one right way of doing things, is true in itself, right? But draw your own conclusions from this. So if you're looking at, for example, a box squat, and you're looking at sitting right back on a box squat, and the fact that Louis Simmons specifically refers to what's happening with the hamstrings there, and why you need to sit back on a box squat and your shin angle and everything else, he's kind of answered his own question, because that's not the one way of doing things. It relates back to the purpose of the box squat. And I would use the box squat, for example, for many different things. And there's a difference there between a box squat and squatting to a box as well. Because, you know, a box squat I might use fairly high up, like a regression progression chain for a squat. Squatting to a box might be something that I'd use at a very regressed level, in terms of, you know, being able to help someone facilitate tension and facilitate stability through limited range of motion and through limited position to position. So to say that there's one right way of doing things negates the fundamental aspect, the aspect that we started with at the beginning of the podcast, which is purpose. Because if you don't, you know, from the purpose of a movement to the purpose of an athletic endeavor to the purpose of training in general, if we don't understand that, then everything above it is meaningless. So to say there's one right way of doing things, essentially, if you really want to put it into what I feel it is at its very essence, is disrespectful to the fact that yes, there's universality when it comes to human purpose. So at the base level, there are some things that we all do as humans, but at the same time, when you get to the actual way of doing things, so processes and performance, that really all we can say is that rep ranges or sets or movements or anything you want to kind of frame this with is more relevant or less relevant to a particular situation and to a particular person and to a particular point in time, because it might be a box squat might be more relevant to someone as they move into powerlifting compared to like squatting for general health. So for me, first of all, underlie everything with human purpose, and then on top of that with individual purpose and priorities, and then once you have those things, then all we can really talk about is relevance. And, you know, if something is more useful or less useful or more relevant or less relevant, but there's always other options. There's always other choices. We're humans. We have a choice. Exactly.
Perfect, man. A while back, you started to speak about breath work, and the main reason I bring it back, is because I think it's such an important aspect of fitness that is neglected by 95% of the population. It's only just having like a big resurgence because of Wim Hof and Brian McKenzie and all those other.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
How do you go about training breathwork, and when did that start?
So that started let's see. If we're talking time-wise, that started as soon as I understood its significance. So maybe for me, let's say 5, 6 years ago, something like that. And understand like its significance. How do I teach it, I guess, is the question that you were asking there. So first of all, when do I teach it? I teach it in every single live interaction course or module or everything that we have, because that's how fundamental it is, and we teach it relatively early on. I was speaking to a coach the other day who, before he even teaches, like, is a CrossFit coach, before he even teaches his on-ramp or whatever you want to call it, he'll teach breathing, because it's that fundamental, it's universal. And as we spoke about, we need to teach and consider the universal stuff before the stuff that sits on top of it, and all other movements sit on top of breathing. So in terms of how I teach it using what I would call empowering and often self-correcting or self-limiting exercises and drills. So what I mean by that is, and this is what we focus on a lot, because this is the expression for me of for movement is subconscious, right? And so everything, when we're talking about breathing, obviously we're breathing all the time, and the way we breathe all the time has a big impact on the way we breathe in the gym, right? So the way that we would naturally breathe or think to set up when we approach a bar or approach a lift is to a large degree predicated by what we do outside the gym. Just like the way we stand in neutral posture or neutral positioning or whatever you want to call it is going to be to a large degree predicated by what we are doing in our day-to-day lives in like the 23 hours outside the gym. So we need to make this stuff understood by the body and the brain at a much deeper level than consciously just trying to do it when you come into the gym, although that obviously has a part to play as well, the intent. So what we do is we do stuff like, as with anything, when you're teaching any fundamental movement, you start on the floor, because that's where the central nervous system is like, you know what, you're cool, we can do some stuff here, we can learn some stuff, there's not too much danger. So we start on the floor, and we do a lot of breathing and bracing drills on the floor, and we use the floor and various different this is going to sound wrong, various different parts of the athlete's body, and like external objects that we can kind of pull from the gym and that people have around them as kinesthetic markers, if you like. So things that the athlete has access to all the time, the first and foremost, which is their own body. So but otherwise we use things like just the feedback from the floor. I'll often get the athlete to take their shoes off, place a shoe on their chest and place a shoe on their belly effectively. And then you have at least 4 points of feedback, being the upper back, the lower back, the shoe on the belly and the shoe on the chest. And so when we're talking about all those points, it's not just me talking, it's the athlete actually, learning how it feels and learning to actually do that. Then we also look at how do that within themselves, I should say. Sorry to close off that sentence. Then we also look at how to take things like setting yourself in a neutral position and how to move that, if you like, from something that is conscious to something that is subconscious. And I know that might sound a bit strange, but it's like, how do we try to change not only what you do in the gym, but what you do on a daily basis? Because and if you look at any positions, right, if you look at kind of positions as a fundamental aspect of understanding movement, which they are, so much about movement can be understood from understanding positions, both in a theoretical sense and also in terms of your body understanding what it feels like to be in a position, for good, for better, or for worse. So the positions that we are in terms of like our joints being in neutrality and our body being in neutrality on a daily basis, doing that is gonna lend itself to how we are in the gym, but also doing stuff that is bad. So like being in, a sort of crouched in, closed in position, from just being hunched up, I guess is what the words I was looking for, from being at a desk and on the computer the whole time, creates permanence in that position. Just like if you practice a position, you pause squats, you start to, with load, you start to create permanence in those positions. So, understanding the difference, taking these universal aspects of movement and so, for example, positions, understanding how positions work across not just squats and deadlifts and presses and everything else, but at the very base of what we do day in, day out, and understanding movement and how strength and movement are governed by the central nervous system gives us a really good understanding of how to coach it. And then my coaching is easy, and the ways and the hows of my coaching is simple, because I just coach in ways that facilitate that type of learning.
Nice. That was a decent answer. That was very comprehensive. Nice one. Do you have, to take a complete left turn, do you have a meditative practice?
No, that's I come from my parents are Indian, so Indian family. So I come from a history of meditation, if you like.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that that's parked in that box, just like business mentorship is for me, which is a strange parallel to draw. I know, but it's one of those things that's parked in the box that I believe in. I guess I read about, but if you think back to what I just said in terms of application, my application of that isn't there at the moment. So I don't profess to know. I don't profess to know a huge amount about it. I see its value, and it's something that I 100+% want to get into more as I go.
On a similar kind of note, do you have any particular morning routines or evening routines, something you do every day to set yourself up for a good day?
Now, those I have, and those are interesting and probably quite weird. So
that's weird is good.
I was thinking about this last night, actually, and I think about this every night. So a few different things. They're probably completely useless to everyone else, but it answers your question, so I'm going to tell you them anyway. So one thing that I do when I finish work for the day or night, whatever time it is I close the office door. And I know that sounds really weird, but if I walk upstairs and I'm not sure whether, because my office is at my home, and if I'm not sure whether I've closed the office door, I will go down and make sure that I've closed the door. And to be honest, I don't really know why I do that, apart from the obvious symbolic nature of actually just finishing for the day, closing the door, and just leaving that stuff behind, and some kind of attempt to separate that work out from whether it's going to bed or spending time with family or whatever it might be. And I've done some work with NLP coaches and general kind of sort of mind coaches, if you like. And that theme has presented itself before. So without digging too much into it, it's just something that I do to just separate out kind of work life from personal life, because I'm not very good at that. So in terms of things that I do at the beginning of the day to set myself up, I am typically my best 80% of my best work gets done before 12 o'clock, before midday. So I'm a morning person and I'm an evening person, and I'm absolutely useless in the afternoon. So hashtag power naps. So in the morning, I just try to optimize. I know that's my most productive time. Like, tried every different approach to do things at different times and split my day up and work in different ways. And time and again, I've come back to the fact that mornings are my most productive times. So I will set myself up in the best way possible to ensure that my mornings are productive. And it's really, really simple stuff. So it's just making sure that I have a task list set out the night before for what I'm going to do the next day. I prioritize those tasks into 1s, 2s, 3s, and then like unnumbered, I guess. So you I won't have any more than 3 ones. And I know there's tons of there's tons of books and research on this, but I won't have any more than 3 ones, and those 3 ones have to get done as priorities and as soon as possible. And if I find myself doing 2s and 3s before I'm doing 1s, that's just stupid. There's something going on there, and I just need to refocus. So and some other stuff that I've been doing recently, and actually shout out to Ben Kuma, who is a cool guy, and I had the pleasure of meeting first. I mean, I've followed his work on the surface level. I've not done any of his stuff, but followed his work on a surface level for a while, and obviously known him in the industry, friends of friends, but had the pleasure of meeting for the first time at the Strength Matters Summit a few weeks back. And he is a super successful guy, and I really respect him for that. And he gave us a cool insight into his kind of business and working practices. And they mostly involved having lots of whiteboards, which you can see behind me. But also he talked about being very strict, and you can kind of see this in the way he works and the way he is, with shutting off the world before a certain time in the morning. So I can't remember exactly when it was. I think until 11 o'clock, he literally doesn't touch his phone, doesn't touch emails and stuff like that. And I know, again, that's a really simple thing and all of us know it, but in reality, how many of us actually do it? So I'm getting better at that, getting better at, even if I see something urgent, like in quotes, urgent in my inbox, just being like, you know what, I know that if I just leave the emails and the communication and the social media and everything else, no matter how tempting it might be, and just focus on the priority 1 tasks. I already know a priority 1, because with a sane mind, I made those priorities the night before or before that, then I'm going to be much more productive. So getting better at all that stuff, just like with everything else. But those are some things that I do that are helping me.
No, I was on Ben Kuma's podcast a while ago, and I was looking back and I was like, fuck, how many whiteboards do you have back there? And there must be like 6 or 7 different whiteboards. It was impressive. Is there anything that you believe that others might find controversial?
That I believe that others might find controversial? That's a good question. It's a difficult one. I'm trying to think of specifics, because I appreciate that I've answered some other questions in more vague terms. So I want to give you some specifics here. Let me see.
No, the overview is good. The overarching principles are where the results lie. So,
yeah, absolutely. I'm just trying to think if I can give you something.
If not, we can come back to it.
Yeah, let's come back to that. I'm sure we've kind of come across a few of those things as we've talked so far, I guess. Yeah, sure. So I'm sure more will emerge as we talk. And if not, I tend to just, if anyone wants to see the stuff that I think that might be controversial, I tend to just fire things up on the Strength Education Facebook page. So if you want to check out some vaguely controversial statements, then probably that's the first place to start.
I'd phrase that as thought provoking. They'll definitely make you think. It's good. What is one message you would tell every, let's say, strength coach that's been around for 3 years?
Strength coach that's been around for 3 years, I would say. So that would typically be in line with our coach programs. So, let me explain this my answer lies within a shameless plug, right? So within our coach programs, we serve 3 different groups of people. There's assistant coaches, coaches, and head coaches, and they are 12, 18, and 24-month programs respectively. And if I was to put it in one, like in a succinct sentence for each one, then with our assistant coach program, we're working on empowering that coach. So allowing that coach to understand that if you base, at that time you come onto the scene, you're kind of not really sure, and you're not really sure what you think, and you're trying to work it out, and you're trying to find mentors, and you're kind of like not so confident in your own opinion because you don't think it's as valid as other people's and everything like that. So with those guys, we basically work on empowering them within themselves, so empowering them to understand that if they base their thoughts and opinions, because it's all opinion at the end of the day. Like we said, no one has the one right answer or the one right thing, on legitimate, systematic, scientific principles, and building up from that base of purpose, and then principles on top of that, then their opinions and their processes and whatever comes from there are just as valid as anyone else's. Because and then on the coach program, so this is the program that we're kind of getting to, we work on helping them, also empowering those coaches to empower others. And for the head coach program, I'm just going to skip to the head coach and come back to the coach, because that's where the question is. So for the head coach program, we work with the coach program could be anyone from, let's say, 2 years in to 20 years in. The difference between those and the guys who are working on the head coach program with us are the head coach guys are the ones we work with to empower them to empower other coaches to empower athletes. So empower other empowerers, if you like, teach other teachers. So with the coaches who have been in the industry for maybe like 3 years or something, it comes, and again, apologies if this is a boring answer, but I think it's the most fundamental place you can start. It has to come back to purpose. And I'm working with coaches who have been in the industry a long time and helping them to understand. So typically these guys, right, they might have a bunch of different qualifications. They might have been to a bunch of different courses, and they are, continually booking onto these things. And part of my work with them is to not only teach them new stuff, but to help them connect up all the perhaps sort of sporadic and confusing and potentially pieces that they haven't necessarily applied, because there's a gap between what they've learned and what they can actually apply. So to connect up all those things and make better use of the things that's already in their head, the things that are already in their head, the things that they're reading. And the way we do that is by connecting them all up at a fundamental level. And that starts at purpose and then moves on through principles. Because if you don't have, and we have those principles I talked about at Strength Education, and they are pretty damn solid in the fact that we can work through any coaching or movement or strength problem through those. But the idea is, with everything that we do, that I'm not asking a coach who comes to work with us to teach strength education. So, I'm not like, and other people do things differently. Other people are like, I've got this system. I want you to learn off me and teach this system. But if I was doing that, then I would become one of the absolutists that we discussed that I don't believe in or agree with. So in terms of what I would say to a coach who has been around for 3 years is basically spend time reflecting and being introspective and working with someone, be it me or someone else, who can help them facilitate and find their purpose, and then help them to build up their own principles of whatever it is that they coach. So principles of coaching and like their sport and movement and strength and fitness and whatever else, because otherwise all you will continue doing for the next few years is just like firing shots at the top of the pyramid, and just having these things that you're not really sure whether they're going to help or not, and you're paying like £500 to £1,000 or bucks or whatever a time, and potentially you don't even necessarily know going into those things whether they sit within your framework, because you don't have a framework.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So the first place to start for me is to build up your own framework. And people do that as coaches, and when you move into a situation where you're coaching other coaches, you kind of do that almost organically, or at least you're forced to do that, because you're like, right, shit, like I've started a gym here, and now it's got busy, and now I've got some people working for me, and I believe in these things, I have these values, and I want to pass that on, and I want my other coaches to pass that on, but I have no idea how I do it. And, and so you're kind of forced then or maybe you are, maybe you aren't, but you should be at least at that point putting putting together a framework. So if you can work out what your values are as a coach, and actually not just pay lip service to it, but sit down and work out what your values are and why, and how that relates to not just who you are as a coach. Like you said, it starts with who you are, but it relates to who you are as a partner, as a friend, as a daughter, as a son, as a mum, as a dad, as everything. If you can root your framework in those things that you really believe in, then it's going to be powerful, and you're going to have a better understanding of yourself. And through that understanding of yourself, you're going to be able to pull out the pieces that are important to you. And when you pull out the pieces that are important to you, then you can work out actually what sits on top of that and what doesn't sit on top of that. And then you wouldn't believe, that may be a vague answer, it may not be, but you wouldn't believe then when you start to, you can look at articles on the internet and you can instantly work out, well, I'm not going to read that because that doesn't fit within my framework, or that may have some meaning to me. So I'm going to have a look at it. And, same for courses, and same for athletes. Someone comes to you and you're not sure whether you guys align, not necessarily in terms of like whether it's nutrition or training or movement or whatever else, but in terms of whether you are going to be the best person for them. And really, for me, that's what it should be. Like, I know it isn't in the real world potentially, and there's money when there's money and everything else involved. But really, it should be: do we align at that fundamental aspect? Can I serve you best? Who else can serve you? And and there's room for everyone. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, spend time and energy and money if you need it. To work out your purpose and your framework, and that will help you. That's your decision-making matrix, basically, from there on. And if you don't have that, then I feel like there's plenty of coaches out there who are going to be beating about the bush a lot and getting somewhere, but kind of going in spirals rather than maybe a slightly straighter line.
Yeah, that's a perfect place to end the show, dude. Thank you so much for coming on the show. If anyone missed the plug-a-thon, where can people find out a bit more about it?
Plug-a-thon, yes, I like that. Thanks so much for having us on, Tom. I really appreciate it. I hope the answers to your questions made some sense and gave some insight, whether it's to me or to what may help others or whatever the case may be. But the plug-a-thon, okay, so in terms of the coach programs and that kind of thing, that's where the majority of my focus and attention and everything else lies, and those are. So the best way to ask or find out about them, you can just email me directly at chet@strengtheducation.com, all one word. The reason being, if you try to go on the website, it's currently being rebuilt, and so it goes through various stages of there's something there and there's something not there. So right now, email us chat@strengtheducation.com. That'll go straight to me and I'll help you out. If you want to know about the book club, because that is a cool place to start, and the way to do that is go to www.strongmindbookclub, all one word.com, and you just pop your name and email address down there. The basic premise of that is that, like I say, you get sent a book a month. It could be completely unrelated, and is most likely seemingly unrelated or somewhat unrelated to what you do. And this is aimed, as I said, at coaches, healthcare professionals, like rehab specialists, people who help other people, basically. And you won't know what it is before, because who doesn't like receiving a surprise, actual, real book through the post? But I guarantee you it will be helpful. And especially when you kind of put a few of these things together, and then we're going to hop on a community-based piece via the good of the internet, using the internet for good for once, and actually discuss some stuff there. And there's a few other bits and pieces, but those are probably the main two things to get your teeth into if you like this kind of stuff.
Awesome. Well, I think I'll be signing up to that book club, because I love getting free books and I love talking about them. So that's awesome. As I said, thank you so much for jumping on the show. I really appreciate it.
Cheers, Tom. Thank you very much. Great to speak to you, mate.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Alpha Movement Podcast. Don't forget, you can get access to these shows before anyone else. You can watch them live, and you can even ask your questions directly to some of these awesome guests via me live, and I shall answer them before your very eyes. So if you want to support the show, head over to iTunes, leave a 5-star review, connect with us on Facebook at facebook.com/alphamovementofficial, or you can find out more at alphamovement.co. And I shall see you soon for another episode of the Alpha Movement Podcast.